they're feeling the fear of, oh my gosh, what if I make a mistake? What if this is the wrong thing? Maybe I have it better than I think I do. And, I'm being selfish, like all those various feelings. So I feel like I hear that all the time. And I think all those feelings are so natural, especially for, a lot, like I work with like very ambitious, like highly qualified people. So it's natural to have all those feelings. And I think that like the first thing is really just acceptance. And I'm sure you talk about this in therapy a lot, right? Like just accepting where you're at, accepting the feelings that you're feeling, knowing that it's normal. And then rather than trying to make really big changes of, okay, like I'm going to find a new role in the next 3 months and this and that. It's just about like small actions that you can take.
When my heart stops, not a second sooner, I'm gonna finish what I've begun. 'Cause my heart's got a reason to believe in me and a dream and whatever may come. And as long as I'm breathing, I'll keep believing that I'm not done until my heart stops.
I think it's no secret that I love the Little Words Project bracelets. I have about 6 or 7 on my arm, ones that have been given to me, ones I've bought myself. I love giving them as gifts. I think they're so inspirational for me personally. They're nice little reminders throughout my day to have hope, to be, have strength, to be in good energy. I just love the bracelets so much. I love giving them. I love receiving them. And if you want to check them out and you want to give it as a gift or get one for yourself, you can use our code QTC for 15% off your first order.
Hi guys, welcome back to this episode of Quiet the Clock. I am so excited to be joined by our first career coach, Eliana Goldstein. Welcome to Quiet the Clock. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
I'm so excited. I mean, career comes up so much when we're talking about timeline anxiety, feeling stuck, feeling behind, comparison. So I can't believe it's been this long for us to have a career expert and career coach on here. I think this is going to be a really amazing episode and resonate with so many people. Before we jump into what you do, can you share your story, how you arrived at becoming a career coach?
Yes. So prior to coaching, I worked in the ad tech industry. I was in ad sales for about a decade. And I think like many people had a good on paper career. It was kind of what I had always set out to do. I was a marketing major, so I landed a role in marketing that naturally turned into a sales role. And I was, to a degree, achieving what I had hoped I would achieve and was making good money, all those kinds of things. But simultaneously, I felt very unhappy, very disconnected from the work that I was doing, really very much out of alignment. And I kept trying to make changes on my own where I would switch jobs and go work at a different organization, or I'd slightly pivot industries, went to work at a startup, all these little changes with the hopes that those would make me feel more aligned with the work that I was doing. But nothing really worked. And I kind of just reached a point of saying, I can't keep doing this anymore. I need to make a bigger change. And so I went through a process that was, honestly, it was a lot of kind of self-reflection. I was doing a lot of market research, networking with people, really trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I thought about going back to school for therapy for a period of time. Yes. And I was just not ready to commit to going to school.
That's a question. We'll get to that later because that's a question I have for you about returning to school.
Yes. All those questions. And so I had a good friend, or a friend of my husband's, who was working as a coach. And he said, I think it's something that you should explore. And so I kind of just decided to try it out and dip my toes in. So I enrolled in a program to become a certified professional coach to just kind of learn more about it and see what it was like. And I really loved it. And it really hit on a lot of what I had kind of discovered about myself throughout the process of self-reflecting in terms of, okay, what are the skill sets I want to be using? What are the values that are important to me in my career? All those various things. And so I originally started it as a side hustle while I was still working, and then went full time and have been doing that now about over 5 years.
Wow.
So,
and are you happier, more fulfilled, more aligned?
Gosh. Yeah. So much happier, so much more fulfilled. I mean, I say all the time, I don't believe in the concept of a dream job. I think it's it's like a silly thing to say. I think it sets an impossible standard. So no job is perfect. And of course, everything has its ups and downs. But I'm very, very happy, very grateful to have kind of come to the place that I'm in now.
Yeah, I love what you said about the dream job, because I do think, and a lot of what we talk about on here is these expectations of how things should be. And
Yes.
it's like, we have to arrive at this job that we love. And maybe it is too unrealistic of an expectation and standard. And how would you reframe that for somebody instead of like, we're looking for a dream job? Because I have also had clients that work so hard to get to the dream job. They arrive at the dream job and they hate the dream job.
100%. I think nothing in life is perfect, as cliche and corny as that sounds. And I think that part of this sounds so cliche, but just like part of the beauty of life is in the struggle. And I think that if you're in a career where everything is perfect all the time, which again, completely unrealistic, then what are you striving for, right? I'm a big believer that you should never, like nothing in your life should be at a 10 out of 10 because then there's no room for growth. So you are looking for places that are ultimately, you know, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but that are in line with your values, that allow you to do work that is important to you, that leverages your skill sets that you enjoy. And you can do that while still sometimes having days where you go, oh, I'm so not in the mood to do this right now, or I'm so frustrated with this situation. And that's okay, right? There's going to be ups and downs, but as long as the majority of the time you're feeling good, I think that's what matters. And then the kind of the subset where you're not feeling as good, again, that's part of life.
Right. That's the expectation. Like that's more of the reality, that you're going to have that like some imperfect days. For you and your journey, like when you were switching and kind of having different experiences and maybe changing jobs, or did you find yourself surprised that you couldn't find the thing until you
100%
enrolled in the career coaching?
100%. I feel like I kept saying to myself, oh, I'll make this change. Now working for this smaller company will be it. Or I'm going to go work for this other organization that aligns with a brand that I really like. And I think the whole point, it was very non-intentional. I was just kind of like, oh, let me just make this change. And I'm assuming that this is going to work. And up until that point, I hadn't really done any deeper reflection on what it is that I even really wanted out of my career. And I think that that's the case for most people. Like we kind of just operate, we graduate, we have our degree, we assume we should get this role that we think is going to make us happy. But like, there is no point that we actually say, is this even what I want to do?
I know that is so true. And I was talking about that on the way over here with all our subway delays and things. It was not encouraged for me either. It was sort of like, again, the shoulds. And then we talk a lot about this on here, like the shoulds being this external like expectation, societal expectation, family expectation, whatever, driving our choices without any pause to be like, do I even want to do this? What do I even enjoy? And for me, it was like the trajectory was you go into finance, and no one was saying, I wasn't even asking myself that. It was kind of just what you should do. And then I graduated, arrived in my finance job, and like cried every single day. Are you seeing a shift that more people are being encouraged sooner to think about earlier on, even maybe during college, to kind of start to think about what would be aligned with values, what would be aligned with, you know, the type of work you want to do?
I mean, I wish. I feel like I'm not necessarily, I'm seeing people at a certain point realizing that they have to do that. I feel like I'm not seeing a push for it to happen, because I think still, like right now, again, like as you said, the societal pressures, parental pressures, I think so many of the people I speak to went into the field that they're in because of whether like a direct parental pressure of, oh, you should be a lawyer, or a parental pressure of like, you need to make X amount of money to be happy. So then pursuing a field that's going to allow you to do that. I still think that very much exists. And especially like the millennial generation, which is predominantly who my clients are.
Okay.
I do think with Gen Z, who, again, I don't work with Gen Z as much, but I do think that Gen Z to a degree like beats to their own drum and doesn't fall prey to societal pressures as much, which is great. And I think that's really important. But I would love to see even more so like in college and university, like classes that are about self-exploration, self-reflection, really figuring out what it is that I want to do. And I feel like we've yet to really see, you know, that come through, but I would love to see that happen more.
Oh my gosh, me too. I'm like, why aren't we, you know, I think we were just talking about off camera, our kids, like I think had lived our own experiences. Like that's something we can pay forward to our kids and encourage them like from a younger age to start
100%
thinking about that. But, you know, one of the other narratives and kind of why one of the reasons called Quiet the Clock is, you know, as a therapist, the narrative of wasting so much time.
Yeah.
And I think about that this exploration is not being encouraged. So people spend, like myself, 2, 3, 4, 5 years in a career that they really don't love.
Right.
And I feel like that's more, I don't want to say it's a waste of time because I think there's always something valuable to,
Right.
But, the beauty of being able to kind of discover a career that you are passionate about earlier in life.
Yeah. I agree. I think that everything is a learning opportunity, and any role that you're ever in that you don't enjoy, then you have to ask yourself, okay, why did I not enjoy that? What can I learn, right? That's going to help me figure out what it is that I want to do in the next role. Like, it's just as valuable to know what you don't enjoy as what you do enjoy.
Yes.
So I think that's the reframe I always try to tell people. So nothing's really ever wasted. And if anything, like in an ideal world, you come out of college, you know exactly what it is that you want to do. You get into this role and you're perfectly, again, no dream job,
Yeah.
but like you're very happy from the start. I also feel like, is that really realistic? I don't know, right? I mean, maybe you can start off on a more aligned path, but I do think experiences are really important. And again,
Totally.
very telling about what it is that you can want to do and what you enjoy. So yes, and maybe not wasting time, but I wonder, and this is like devil's advocate of what could potentially be lost if you just like immediately arrive where you should be, right? Like,
Yeah.
again, I don't know. I think it's like a good thing to think about.
I think I agree. I couldn't agree with you more because I think about my own journey and how many pivots. And listen, I didn't leave finance and then find therapy. It was like so many different detours going back. We'll talk about school, but like going back to school like 3 times over.
Right.
And now in the midst of it, it was very difficult. It was like I was watching everybody around me talk about comparison, like kind of, moving ahead in their careers. And I was at the very beginning, but I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it for anything because I think I'm a better therapist for it. I've learned so much. And I think it's an important message to just reiterate that like you can still take so much,
100%.
even if you're not exactly where you want to be now.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you won't be there. And there's probably some value to where you are now.
100%. Everything's experience. And exactly like you said, probably having made those pivots and those changes, like you said, has made you a better therapist, right? I know for myself, the experience that I had pivoting and switching careers, and obviously I do a lot of advising about, more typical career strategies. Having been in that situation and pivoted and networked and interviewed so many times, that makes me a better coach now, right? So everything becomes valuable experience. And again, it might not be, exactly how you wanted things to play out, but in looking back, you likely will be like, okay, I'm glad that it worked out the way that it did.
It's always a looking back. And part of my intention and goal with this podcast is like, if you can feel that way while you're in it and not just and the gratitude and the value for the experience in the moment versus like hindsight 2020, like just to safeguard yourself from more like anxiety or sadness or bad narratives or comparison. Like, how do we like
100%.
enjoy the ride now?
I love that.
One of my questions for you, among others, is, it seemed like you were comfortable at least to pivot and to change and to explore. I know for a lot of my clients, they get really stuck on how to do that, or there's fear that comes up with changing. I'm curious what you see with your clients in terms of that, in terms of like being willing to try or pivot or just move.
Yeah. No, I think that the feeling of stuckness is so common, and it's what I hear from people all the time. And people come to this point where they recognize and are aware that what they're doing is not what they want to be doing, but they feel very paralyzed because they don't know what to do instead. And simultaneously, they're feeling the fear of, oh my gosh, what if I make a mistake? What if this is the wrong thing? Maybe I have it better than I think I do. And, I'm being selfish, like all those various feelings. So I feel like I hear that all the time. And I think all those feelings are so natural, especially for, a lot, like I work with like very ambitious, like highly qualified people. So it's natural to have all those feelings. And I think that like the first thing is really just acceptance. And I'm sure you talk about this in therapy a lot, right? Like just accepting where you're at, accepting the feelings that you're feeling, knowing that it's normal. And then rather than trying to make really big changes of, okay, like I'm going to find a new role in the next 3 months and this and that. It's just about like small actions that you can take, right? Really breaking down the process to reduce the overwhelm, because the more overwhelmed you feel, the less action you're going to take. So really just thinking about, okay, like what's one small thing I can do? Maybe it's just like starting that self-reflection of, okay, I'm not feeling happy right now. Why is that? Maybe I start kind of recording on a weekly basis things that I did at work that I really didn't enjoy and why. Or conversely, were there even small things that I did enjoy doing and why, right? Like, and starting to look for clues there. Maybe you tell yourself, I'm going to find one person who I feel like I really respect in their career, what they've built, and I'm just going to have a conversation with them, right? Something small. But if you start with small actions, it allows you to feel more intentional. It allows you to feel like you're doing something,
Yes.
and that will kind of cascade into more.
I think, I so resonate with that in terms of like work with I do with so many clients and highly ambitious, like very smart, very qualified women, men too. And they feel so overwhelmed because they are thinking about that
The
big
big
step
picture.
and not even really breaking it. I help them, but break it down to these small steps, like you said, or even thinking about like, people I've seen too, I'm curious your thoughts on this, like people that really want to completely pivot. Let's say they've been a lawyer. They're like, I don't know. This is all I've done. I don't know what else I would do. I was like, well, just start to think about your strengths and your skill sets and and then we can think about how you apply it somewhere else. But I see that stuckness too. It's like, I've only done this. I don't even know what else I would be good at.
For sure. And I think, so something that I talk about with my clients too, like kind of in that process is think about when you like for a lawyer, right? You think, oh, I've only done this, I've only done that. What you need to kind of do is like widen your scope a little bit. And I always tell people, think about what is it that engages you the most in your role and why, and what disengages you, right? I call them areas of engagement and areas of disengagement. And you could say 90% of what I do disengages me, right? You might maybe be making a list. I hate doing this. I hate doing these contracts. I hate talking to clients. Like I really hate all of it. But here's this one thing that I like doing that engages me. And literally it occupies, 3% of my time, but I enjoy this, right? That one thing is a really big clue. And then you can expand on that. What's the why behind it? What are some transferable skills I'm doing when I'm using this, right? So it's not about, like, it's very common to feel I hate so much of my role, but I would bet that there's probably one small aspect of things that you do enjoy, or you can even look to prior things before that job, an internship that you had, right? Or a project that you worked on in school or university. Like, I know that's hard to dig back to that, but it's really kind of thinking of the full picture and even just finding small subsets of things that you've enjoyed and trying to understand the why behind that.
How do you help people get to, one, the acceptance and the place of building awareness on what they like and don't like, or what engages them and disengages them? Because what I found too is people get so stuck in like, I just hate this job so much.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to get out of it. And then it's really hard for them to see beyond that, to start to do some of these exercises and suggestions that you're making.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, and again, as a therapist, you probably know much better than me, but I feel like sometimes like you just got to force yourself. I know it sounds so much easier said than done, but I feel like I always talk about like, okay, if you want to like rewire your brain, you have to take action in stark contrast to all the action you have previously taken, right? So it's so easy to be there and be like, I just hate my job and I'm never going to get out of this. And then what's the point, right? Because that's your comfort zone. You're comfortable saying that because then you don't have to make any changes and you don't have to potentially experiment. So what are you going to do that's outside of your comfort zone? Like you're going to have to force yourself to do something that feels a little bit uncomfortable, right? And it can be like, again, it can be small table stakes where I would literally just say to a client, just for this week, I want you to, at the end of every day, take 20 minutes to reflect on what did I do today that I didn't, and you could say I hated all of it. But maybe finding one thing that was, even if you didn't like it, that was more enjoyable than the others, right? It's just the small steps. And again, that's, you just got to force yourself to do it. Like sometimes you just have to force yourself to take action. And I think that in doing that, you'll be like, oh, okay, this was an interesting exercise. Oh, I didn't really realize that about myself. And that kind of creates motivation.
Yeah.
So I think if we truly want to make change, we have to force ourselves to do things sometimes when we feel stuck, even if it feels really intimidating.
Yeah, like, yes, very intentional and like, yes. What are some of the other themes you see besides kind of stuckness or fear come up in the work that you do? Like comparison, or what are kind of the other major themes that come up? Definitely
comparison. I think that's a really big one, especially again, talking about like the very ambitious overachievers to a degree. You just feel like, well, no matter what I do, it seems like they have all this figured out and I don't. And it's so easy to do that. And something I talk about a lot with that, I'm going to completely forget about the name, the author of the book now, but there's a book called The Gap and the Gain. And this has actually been a really good reframe for me. Like I use it as for myself in building my business of when you fall into that comparison trap of, oh my gosh, look at all these people, look how much I have to do, look how far I still have to go, you can either focus on the gap, right? Here's where I am and here's where I want to be. Or you can focus on the gain. Here's where I am and here's where I used to be.
Ooh.
Right? And so that's like something I constly tell myself.
Wow.
We're going to have to find out the author of the book.
Yes, because everyone's going to want to read this book. I want to read this book.
It's literally called The Gap in the Gain.
Okay.
My husband recommended it to me. And
Your husband has really given you good direction.
My husband's great. He's the best. When I find myself falling into a comparison trap, and I'm usually like comparing myself, being like, look what they've done and I need to get there, right? I go, okay, let me get back into my own lane. Where am I now compared to where I was 6 months ago, a year ago? How proud am I for what I've achieved? And I find that that's like very grounding and has been a really helpful reframe to me that I encourage like my clients to use all the time.
I think there's so many things that are difficult about comparison, but one is like sometimes we don't know the full picture. We're looking at a curated picture. I love sort of changing that perspective because I even see this in working with my clients that we forget how far we've come because we're always looking ahead. And that applies to anything, whether that's like relationship or if you want parenthood, it's like what I don't have yet. It's like, well, what do you have now? And what have you done to get where you are now?
Right. And another thing too is if you had what it is you say you want, what was the opportunity cost of that? Like what might you not have had, right? If you had done that. And like people who are in role, I'll speak to somebody who's been in a role for so many years and they'll be like, why did I stay so long? I shouldn't have stayed here. This was a big mistake. And I say, okay, hypothetically, let's just say you left this job 3 years ago. What would you have lost in having left early, right? And so often they're like, you're right. That huge project that I worked on, those skills that I developed, those relationships I had, right? So it's another good reframe to think about. There is an opportunity cost to you having potentially done what it is you say you want, wish you had done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think these, these mind frame and perspective shifts are so powerful, but sometimes you do need someone to support you and say, hey, look at it this way. I love these moments in session where like, oh wow, I didn't even think about it like that. It's like
that's the best.
Often it's the best. Like often we don't.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about a couple things. Burnout.
Yeah.
How often you see it. And I saw a quote you wrote on your Instagram, which is about burnout. It has nothing to do with how many hours or how hard you work. It's caused by working for people you don't like towards a goal you don't believe in systems that grant you no agency. I loved.
Because I can't take credit for that quote. I think it might have come from someone else,
but you posted it. I loved it when I saw it because I think we always think about burnout as like I'm overworked, I'm overstretched, I'm overscheduled. Yeah. But as someone that works for myself, I'm all of those things sometimes too. But they don't feel
you don't feel burnout. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that it really is true that when you're doing work that gets you excited, that you feel motivated in, and there's that sense of alignment. Feeling that sense of burnout is much more unrealistic. Like you'll feel good about the work that you're doing. And when you're doing work that's just thankless, that's not meaningful to you at all, that doesn't align with your values, it doesn't allow you to have the impact that you want to have, of course, you're already kind of running on empty because you're not getting any sense of fulfillment from it. So you're so much more likely and easily going to burn out. And I think that obviously, like, again, you work for yourself, I work for myself. I still have to set boundaries. And I can definitely get into times where I feel stressed or overwhelmed. But I think feeling stressed or overwhelmed is very different than feeling burnt out, right? Yeah. So, and I think that because I love the work that I do, I can recognize and say, okay, I'm putting a little too much on my plate right now. Let me kind of pause and get back to basics here to ensure that I can kind of get back on track. But again, it's very different than that feeling of burnout. And that's why really getting clear on what it is, on feeling more aligned in your career is going to make a really big difference in being able to kind of manage and navigate burnout.
I so relate to what you said about setting our own boundaries. Sometimes I'm like, why did I say yes to that?
Right. 100%.
But for someone listening that's not working for themselves or is feeling this type of burnout, what are some boundaries that maybe they could set to survive the environment while they start to reflect and learn and, eventually hopefully pivot if that's what they want?
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that people really struggle to do is to ask for help and to delegate. And I think that like the first thing that you really need to do is really go through what it is that you're doing, and that's what's on your plate. And before you have any type of conversation, if this is a conversation you're going to have with your manager, really ask yourself, okay, what do I feel are the top priorities for me? That's work I really need to do. And what is something that I think I could potentially delegate, right? Or that I feel is potentially a lower priority. And just have a better sense for yourself, because again, with the type of people that we work with, you want to say yes to everything. You feel like if you don't say yes, then you're not doing a good job and it reflects poorly on you, right? And that's a recipe for disaster.
Totally.
So do some of that work to kind of think about it on your own. And then I would have a conversation with whether it's your manager or whoever you think it is and say, look, this is the place that this is kind of how I'm feeling right now. I want to work with you to better prioritize what are the things that I should be focusing on and figure out if there is any work that I can delegate. And again, come with being solution oriented. This isn't a venting session of, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed. Like that's not going to go over well. But if you come from a solution oriented place of here's what I'm thinking, and also positioning everything from the perspective of this is where I add the most value. This is what I tell my clients all the time. If you say, I have all these various things on my plate, what I really recognize is this project or this workload is where I feel I can bring the most value. So I really want to prioritize this. Are you aligned? And if that's the case, how should I handle the rest of this work? Right? So you got to kind of do your own reflection, but then have the conversation and know that having the conversation doesn't make you a bad employee.
Yeah, I think there's some outdated ideas about advocating for yourself in the workplace that makes you like I'm whining or I'm complaining but I love how you said come with a solution. Don't let it be a venting dump. And I think that's really good advice because for the people that it's not possible right now to leave the job or leave the career or pivot, there's just knowing there's things that you can do now that could potentially improve your current work environment.
100%. And that's what I tell people all the time. When people come to me to want to make a change, generally, first and foremost, I try to see, is there anything we can do to adjust where you're at? Because truthfully, it's a tough job market right now. I'm sure we're reading the numbers for, what are we in August? So the numbers for July weren't great. The numbers for August, it definitely feels like it's a bit of a softening job market. So that's not to say that you can't find a role elsewhere and get hired, but it can definitely feel more intimidating to want to make a change. So it is important first and foremost to see, is there a way that I can potentially improve my role right now? Sometimes it's also exploring a lateral move. I've had clients who have made moves internally within their organization to another team that better plays into their skill sets. So there's definitely options and things to think about before you kind of dive headfirst into, I'm done, I need something entirely new.
Yeah. In thinking about sort of the landscape of the market now, does it change how you coach a little bit or what you suggest, considering the numbers are not great or maybe the opportunities are not flourishing in the way they were before?
I would say it hasn't fully changed in terms of my overall strategies, but what I will say is that it takes more work and more consistency. And I try to be really honest with people about it and say that this is a tougher job market. There are people who are landing jobs every single day and you can be one of them, but those people are putting in a lot of effort into it. And you have to go in knowing that it's going to take more networking. It's going to require you to put yourself out there more, that it's not the kind of thing where you're like, oh, I'm going to spend an hour on this a week and figure it out. It takes effort and consistency. And I think it's important for people to know that. And I mean, my strategies have never been around update your resume and apply for 100 jobs online. That I don't think has ever worked very well. And it definitely doesn't work now.
Well, I mean, you're probably one of how many?
So many.
LinkedIn, whatever.
So many. And postings are getting infiltrated because of AI, so many different factors going on. So I'm a very honest and realistic person that I say, it's definitely tougher, but you can do it and people do it every single day. And it's just about channeling your efforts in the right way.
What would you say is the top 2 successful strategies, right? It's not just spending an hour and putting your resume up there and applying to multiple jobs. But what would you say are if you had to say top 2 strategies that will set you apart in the job search? So
I would say kind of at a high level, and these are a little bit connected. One is what I think about as the proactive job search strategy, which versus the reactive job search strategy. So reactive job search strategy is find a job posting online, tailor my resume, apply, right? That's kind of like the typical way that we think about it. And that's reactive in the sense that we're waiting for a job to get posted. We're then going in and putting ourselves out there. A proactive job search strategy is looking to target roles before they're even posted and really thinking about how do I get in front of companies, decision makers, hiring managers, where openings could open up on a team and I am kind of there and already have that relationship established. So really being proactive. And then that directly ties into networking, which I don't even like to call it networking because I think people like have a complete meltdown when they hear that word. It scares people, but really relationship building.
Okay.
That's going to make the biggest difference. I think the stats are like if you just kind of cold apply for a job online, you have maybe a 3% chance of getting an interview. If you apply for a role with a referral, you have a 40% chance.
Wow, that's a huge increase.
So it's a huge increase, and people just need to be spending their time and effort really focusing on developing relationships, figuring out and sharing, here's how I think here's how I could add value to you and your team, and being creative from that perspective to build a relationship before the role is even available.
Yeah. I always love anything proactive versus reactionary. I think from a reactionary place, it's so emotion filled that like there might not be clarity in what we're communicating, clarity in what we want. So I think a proactive approach is always, always the best.
100%.
One thing I see come up a lot, I want to ask you about is imposter syndrome, because I see that come up so much with the clients that I work with. And I'm curious how much you see it and how you help people navigate imposter syndrome.
So imposter syndrome is one of those things. It's a pet peeve of mine because like you said, it's so common, and I apologies if this comes off, rash, but I find it's like the silliest thing because to me, I think of imposter syndrome as just like feelings of self-doubt, right? You're questioning yourself in the moment. Are they going to find this out about me? They realize I didn't know how to do it. It's self-doubt. Self-doubt is literally the most basic form of human nature. Like we're all going to question ourselves. And I think we've made it into this thing of like, oh, I suffer from imposter syndrome. And I think that gives it so much more power and makes it feel like a much bigger thing than it really is, right? So kind of almost to a degree to be like, oh, I'm doubting myself right now. Like, that's normal. That's not a big deal, right? And what I really try to do, and this is a reframe that I use for myself as well, is I try to seek out imposter syndrome. I tell myself that if I'm feeling it, that's probably a sign that there's something that's challenging me that feels a little bit scary, that it's an opportunity for me to grow. And I know that if I go for a long period of time without feeling any of that, like, that's not a good thing. So I really kind of train myself, and I try to train my clients as well to, okay, if you want to keep calling it imposter syndrome, sure, but I like to think of it as just moments and feelings of self-doubt. And I want to chase those feelings because I know that will give me an opportunity to grow and be better.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I also like what you said, like we can't know everything, right? It's also normal to like not know everything.
Yeah.
And that reframe is amazing. It's like we want to feel challenged. Especially for ambitious people, like we want to be challenged. We want to learn new things. We want to develop new skills. So like almost inviting that feeling instead of fighting. I think we just shy away from these terms because they have these connotations of such heaviness, like comparison or imposter syndrome. But if you really break it down, there is always something to learn from those things. It's a cue. There's a cue to you something is happening. So instead of just being like, oh, I feel it, like I don't want to feel it.
Right.
It feels bad. Like, okay, you're feeling it. So let's process and explore it. Like, what is it cueing to you? What is it telling you?
Right. Exactly. Like embrace it. Don't sweep it under the rug. What can you learn from this? And really just being able to reframe it as, again, like a normal human emotion. And I think this is funny. I wish I could remember what it is, but I just saw something literally on the way here on the subway. It was from like Harvard Business Review about something specifically about self-doubt and why self-doubt is so important. And I'll send it to you after.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
And it was talking about how actually it's important. Like self-doubt shows your human side and your ability to be empathetic versus people who lacks any type of self-doubt, that's actually a really dangerous thing for people who lack it.
Yeah.
I forget what it was
Please
exactly,
send it to me. Send it to me.
This is so good. This is so good for people to realize like, oh, this makes me human. Like I need to feel self-doubt.
I know, right? Instead of being afraid of all these feelings that come up, like embrace them and try to understand them.
Yeah.
We mentioned school a little bit earlier, but I'm curious your thoughts about maybe particularly or more specifically for people that are thinking about a complete pivot.
Yeah.
Right. I think sometimes the thought, and it was my path too, is like, I have to go back to school. So I'm curious your thoughts on returning to school as a pathway to complete pivot?
So I have a lot of opinions on this.
Okay.
I think that obviously there are certain situations where you do need to go back to school, right? You're becoming a therapist, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer. There are certain situations where it is an absolute necessity. I think a lot of the times when you kind of think about like more typical like graduate programs and various, things like I don't want to put anybody on the spot or call anybody out specifically, but when you think about kind of going back to school, I think a lot of the times people do it for the wrong reasons. And especially in this market right now, like you can see study after study shows that employers value experience over education.
Ooh.
And I think even, again, this was a number of months ago, but I think they showed a stat from, it was basically evaluating graduates from the top MBA programs and showing that these MBA graduates are having more trouble than ever landing roles. Like these are people graduating from Harvard and Stanford, the biggest business schools in the country. And it just goes to show that while yes, part of it is the tough job market, that it really is about your experience far more than your education. And I think that people kind of do it as a quick fix and they think that it will solve things for them when realistically it might not, and it will obviously, it's a massive investment. So
time, money. Yeah.
Time, money, exactly. So I think you have to really, like what I always tell people is you have to do your market research and really figure out if you have a clear understanding of the role that you want and where you want to be and target, speak to people in those roles.
Yeah.
Really find out from them, was school a necessity? Was it not? What, if you went to school, what did you learn from it and how did it help you? And really do the proper market research before you make any of those decisions. I would say, again, a lot of the times it's not necessary, and the right connection and the right referral will potentially be just as helpful as those years of education. And again, now in the world of LinkedIn Learning and Coursera and Udemy and all these online learning platforms, you can learn the skills that you need, and you don't need to go to a 2, 3, 4 year program in order to do that. Again, I caveat, do your research, but that's my general opinion.
I think that's great advice. And I do think a lot of people think that, and myself included, I thought it was the quick fix.
Yeah.
I went back, my first degree was in PR, corporate communications, and I still wasn't at a place where I'd done all the self-reflection and what do I really want? I was just like, I got to get out of finance. And I finished that after 2 years and I was like, I don't even want to do this either. Right. And I remember the best advice I got, because once I finished my master's in mental health counseling, I was considering a PhD. And one of my friends who had gone through a PhD program, she was like, well, what exactly do you want to do? Right. And once I laid out to her what I want to do, she's like, you don't need a PhD for that. So it's helpful to like do the research or talk to someone that maybe has been through a program that you're considering. I think just being really thoughtful about, because it is a big decision
and a big investment. And sometimes I talk to people who are like, no, I love school and I want to go back. I'm like, great. Go for it. That's awesome. But that has to be a really intentional decision. And it shouldn't be, oh, I just think I need to do this, or, this is going to make it easier for me to get hired, right? Because again, you think, especially the job market now, which is, as it gets tougher, you put yourself out for another 2 or 3 years, that actually could potentially end up being a disadvantage to you, right?
It's interesting for me as we're talking about this. I'm thinking about like how I hire in my practice. And for me, the most important thing first, in which people obviously they have to have the degree because you have to be licensed or have a limited permit to practice. But what I look for first is, are you a good person?
Yes.
I'm not looking for like, what school did you go to? What's your GPA? What was your internship? First and foremost for me is like, are you a good person? And are you going to fit in with the culture of the practice that I've created?
Oh, 100%. I think culture fit is everything. And it's it's so important. And you can't learn that necessarily. And even for me, like I have a salesperson and she has no background or experience in sales, which seems crazy. She's been a client facing and she's good at building relationships, but has no experience selling. But she came through a referral on my team and we're trying it out and it's going really great. So, and it's because there was built-in comfort knowing that it was referral. And I spoke to her and she was just awesome. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So
I know. I think like who you work with makes a lot of difference in terms of like your career happiness. This is another quote I saw on your Instagram. I don't know if it's yours or someone else's, but it's the reason people are so unhappy in career is because they are chasing a version of success that is not their own. I thought that was so huge because like we were saying earlier, it's the should of like, I should do this. And often it is not what
Mhm.
we have decided for ourselves
100%.
based on what we value, what we like, what fulfills us.
Yeah, that one's mine.
Okay, that one's amazing.
And I think you were touching on this in the beginning, but it's that idea of success usually is influenced by societal ideas and pressures, by our parents, by our friends. And we have this idea of, okay, I'm going to graduate. I'm going to get this job. I'm going to have the 6-figure salary. I'm going to be doing this work and I'm going to feel great and I'm going to be super successful. And so many people potentially get that and they feel miserable, right? And generally that's because that version of success was not their own personal version. It was either either consciously or subconsciously influenced by the people around them.
Yeah.
And so if that's where the lack of alignment is, if that is not something that you are truly deeply aligned with, it doesn't matter what you achieve, you're not going to feel good about it. So like I always tell people, we have to get very clear on what does success mean to you and really to you, because you're going to naturally say, well, this and that. And when you dig deeper, you're going to realize, no, that's not what I actually want. So what does success mean to you? And then kind of work backwards from there.
Yeah. What I've seen too, and even for myself, I think it's so difficult to disentangle like the ideas that are so concrete on what success is, because as a society, we have like defined success as status, as title, as money, as company you work at. And really when we break it down, for a lot of people, if you get really clear, it has nothing to do with any of those things. But I think it's very difficult to rewrite those meanings of success, because for so long it's externally been like this, that.
100%. And most of the people, you know, when you're working with someone in their mid, late 20s, 30s, that's 20 plus years of programming around this is what success means. So to kind of deprogram that is really difficult.
Yes.
And I think that's natural. And obviously, I mean, when you talk about, you might say, well, to me, success is like living on the beach in Costa Rica. Like, this is what really is meaningful to me. You also have to be able to, you know, marry that with like, but what is the life that I realistically need to live? You know, how much money do I need to have to pay my bills, right? So there's like a level of realism that's necessary.
Yes.
But I think that like something that I focus on a lot is really focusing like on what are your core values in your career? Like things like, do I value collaboration, autonomy, creativity, impact, recognition, right? If you can get clear on what your values are, that is really helpful from the definition of success perspective. Because again, like you might say, I really value flexibility and I've been working in a career that allows me to have no flexibility. But if you can just then find a career that allows you to feel more flexible, that will change things a lot.
Yeah.
So there's a big element of like core values.
That was the one. That was the driving one for me. Is when I was in finance, I was like, I get 10 days out of the year, because at the time it was 2 weeks vacation. I was like, oh my gosh, that doesn't sit right with me. And so flexibility was the driving one for me. Is like, how do I find more flexibility and freedom, and knowing that, you know, I didn't obviously find the thing right away, but it was the thing that drove me to like guide me of like, okay, this doesn't give me that. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I do a lot of value works with my clients, and we just really need to be like perpetuating these conversations and these like moments of reflection, because I'll tell people to, you know, what are your values? And they literally have to go home and exactly. And they have to go home and Google values.
Yeah.
But it speaks to like just the lack of kind of dialogue around this.
Yep. It's so important.
Yeah. I want to ask you kind of, if you can think some of the biggest career mistakes you feel like people make.
Biggest career mistakes people make. So I was thinking about this before, and this is kind of coming up for me again. It's a big career mistake, but it's also, I don't know, kind of on a larger level, like a life mistake. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but I think that perfectionism, you were talking to me about things that I see all the time. And I think that people bring this lens of perfectionism into everything in their career. And I just find that it's the most, like perfectionism, it's not an easy thing to manage, but it's just the most stifling feeling to have. And I think it kind of goes back to the idea of, if you're not growing, you're dying, and you have to be able to make mistakes so that you can figure out how and where you grow from there. So I think it kind of goes into this idea of like kind of always striving to be perfect, not being willing to be messy or make mistakes. And I think that's a huge mistake people make. Like, it's a mistake to not make mistakes. Like, put yourself out there, raise your hand, say something that feels stupid and embarrassing in the moment, right? Ask the questions. I think like really striving to kind of take messy action is a really important thing and a mistake that people really avoid doing. I'd say that's a really big one. Other career mistakes. I think also just sometimes like in a new role, right? Like I'm even thinking about a client that I was just speaking to. People, when things get a little bit uncomfortable, people are very quick to say, oh, this wasn't the right thing. Like I need to go to the next thing, right? And I think sometimes people don't give themselves enough time to adjust to a new role, to a new environment. And I'll speak to someone 3-4 months in and they're like, oh, this isn't working. I'm so unhappy. And then I speak to them 6, 7, 8 months later and they're like, I'm so happy. I'm so glad that I didn't make any change. Right. So again, those are kind of high level mistakes. No,
but they're big ones.
Yeah. And similar, like discomfort can cue something to you. Like, what is it telling you?
Right.
I know. And we also want this instant gratification and this validation that like, okay, this was the right choice.
Right. 100%.
Yeah. And the mistake thing, like I totally relate to that too, because a lot of narratives I've heard is like, I don't want to make a mistake. I was like, nothing is a mistake. Like if you try something and like, then you learn you don't like that. And we will pivot and try something else.
And what a ridiculous standard to hold yourself to. Like, I don't want to make any mistake, right? And I think it's just, again, it goes back to like the rewiring of your brain. If you want to get comfortable, you know, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone, you have to allow yourself to make mistakes. And like, I would encourage somebody in that situation. I'd be like, I want you to make a mistake this week. Like, do something that feels really uncomfortable. You know, ask the question. People get so nervous about asking questions. Well, they'll think I'm stupid. They'll think I don't know. Ask the question, right? And you will then see, oh, that actually wasn't nearly as big of a deal as I thought. And then comfort is created around doing that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You create this new association that it's like okay to ask and it's not as scary as you think.
Right.
What would you say, and we covered some of this stuff with everything you've already shared, but advice for people starting over in their 30s and 40s. I think there is this idea that like, it's acceptable or easier to try things in your 20s because you're younger and maybe you don't have as many responsibilities. And then when you get into a stage of 30s or 40s where maybe you have more responsibility, it's, and I want to validate it, it's probably not as easy.
For sure. Yeah.
But what would you say to people starting over in that stage of life? Because I do think while it's not as easy, it's still possible and it's still important, especially if you're not happy or you're burnt out.
Absolutely. And I think one, if you're starting over later on, and again, 30s or 40s is so much later on, but still compared to your 20s, exactly as you said, it feels later. I think first and foremost, I think, again, there's an all or nothing mentality of I've decided that I want to leave my job. So now I kind of have to start all over. I have to quit, whatever it is. Nothing has to be a big drastic change like that. If you've acknowledged that where you are is no longer working, and maybe you've already put in some of the effort to improve your current role or discuss an internal lateral move, know that you don't have to leave your job until you have something else lined up, right? So maintain the security. It's very rare that I would ever advise somebody to quit without something else lined up, right? So just remind yourself of that. And even if you feel really unhappy and miserable, if you've been able to manage it for the time that you have, you can probably manage it for like another 6 months or so, or whatever it might be. So that's the first thing. Then the second thing I would say to do is really start leaning into that self-reflection work. And there's usually 5 things that I have people focus on. So I talked about it before, your areas of engagement and your areas of disengagement. Start looking into understanding what your career values are. And I usually say kind of try to find like the 3 to 4 most important ones for you. Your zone of genius, which is a term you may have heard before, people might be familiar with, but it's kind of like your natural superpower, what comes to you easily, where you're really doing work that you feel good about and that you feel is making a positive impact. And then your states of flow, which is also referred to as deep work. Basically, like when you're doing work that you get so in the zone, you lose track of time and you produce super high quality work in those moments. So I usually say what you want to start focusing on, uncovering and understanding those 5 things about yourself.
Yeah.
And those are very telling because then you can start kind of pulling out, okay, what are the patterns that I'm noticing here, right? I see a lot of repetition between my states of flow and what my zone of genius is. That could be significant, right? And you can see, okay, here are my strengths. Here's maybe even some areas of improvement for me, kind of pull out the relevant information. And then from there, I won't get into too many steps, but like then I say use tech to your advantage. If you have this information about yourself, I would use like a ChatGPT or any type of AI tool to say, hey, I'm at this place in my life. I'm wanting to make a change. I'm X amount of years in. I've been doing this work. Here's some really important data and information that I've discovered about myself. I'm curious to, hear if there are maybe 2 or 3 potential paths I should be exploring.
Yeah.
And that's your starting point, right? It's not about let me get this all figured out. It's just about identifying a good starting point that you can then start taking action on. And again, just doing that entire process is going to make you feel so much better and so relieved and know that you're moving towards another goal. So that's what I would advise.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so manageable. The way you break it down, it doesn't make it overwhelming, the steps or things to start to reflect on and try to understand about yourself. What are your thoughts? Well, I lost my train of thought on the next question what are your thoughts on people holding this narrative that what they want is not possible, or it's either or? Like I can have something fulfilling, and if I want to be creative, I can have that, but I can't have money.
Yeah. I hear that all the time. I think that if you believe that, then that becomes your reality, right? I think everything is kind of like through the lens that you tell yourself. So if you say, I can either have like a career that I love or I can make a lot of money, then you're going to need to choose, right? But, and again, it sounds a little woo-woo out there, but if you create the possibility of I can have a career that I really love while making good money, then it does become a possibility, right? And so I think it's like first and foremost, like you genuinely need to believe that that's true. And you need to also be flexible, right? Going back to that idea of, well, in my perfect world, I'm teaching yoga on the beach in Costa Rica. I mean, look, who knows? Maybe you could make a really great, successful life doing that. But you have to kind of be able to be flexible and think outside the box and kind of get to what I was talking about before. Well, if I understand my core strengths, if I understand my values, maybe I've thought that looks like A, B, and C, and if I have to do it in this specific way, but is there a way that I can lean into my strengths and still be in alignment with my values while also being able to do work that pays me well, right? So it's about believing the possibility of it and then being flexible about what that looks like and not just being like very stringent around it could only be this specific thing.
Oh my gosh. I think if we're thinking about mistakes, career and life mistakes, like we were saying earlier, I think having such a rigid vision of how things should look, and I hate the word should, is such a limiting thing.
100%.
Right? Like the flexibility and the possibility and just the widening our perspective of what's possible. I think when we're like, the career has to look this way and the relationship has to look this way and the timeline has to look this way, it's so limiting. And there's so many other like opportunities and paths that are possible.
Yeah. It's kind of like goes into the idea of like, I hate the idea of a 5-year plan or like I want to put together a vision for 5 years, my 10-year plan. I always say the most I will do is a 1-year plan because so much of your life will change. And if you try to kind of align yourself around this is the big 5-year vision, again, inevitably things will change. And it's very stifling to think about I'm doing these things to influence myself in 5 years from now when 700 different things could happen, right? So I think there's an element of you do need to be forward thinking and you have to be intentional with how you act, but also there's a balance between zooming way too far out and kind of creating enough space to say, okay, this is where I am and this is where I want to be. How do I move myself there?
I love that advice. You have more of a 1-year plan versus a 5-year plan. Because I also think about just what kind of the consequence of a 5-year plan and not going the way you imagine. And then you feel like a failure or bad about yourself or all kinds of things come up if you don't meet that. Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't even talk about pressure, but I wanted to ask you before we wrap up a couple other things. This other quote I saw on your Instagram was, which is so relevant to the things that we talk about, is you are not behind. You're just on a timeline that no one taught you to trust. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I think that is so important.
Yeah. And it goes exactly like you said, goes back to the idea of success. And I'm going to get this job by this age. I'm going to be in this role and this, this position by that age. And when that doesn't happen, you catastrophize and it feels like everything is falling apart. Right. And like in those moments, it's reminding yourself, okay, this didn't go exactly as I had planned, but what has happened as a result of this timeline occurring, right? And again, that reframe of what might the opportunity cost have been had my exact life timeline gone exactly according to plan, right? So kind of asking yourself those questions. And I truly, truly believe that if you kind of lean into, okay, there was a level of meant to be behind this. Again, I know I'm not like a big manifestation woo-woo person, but I do believe you kind of have to like trust the process a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you do and like create acceptance around it, then you can see the opportunities and what you have learned and what has been helpful and beneficial to you. So yes, there's a timeline that someone has taught you, again, whether consciously or subconsciously. 9 times out of 10, that timeline is not going to work exactly as planned. Expect that, but ask yourself, okay, what has been working well in the timeline that I have found myself in?
I've always found, again, when we look back, like retrospectively, that the timeline always makes sense.
Always.
But it's so hard to see
in
it
the moment.
in the moment.
Yeah.
It's so hard to see it in the moment.
As you said, and I love the reframe you said about, really being able to like practice gratitude and have appreciation for what's happening in the moment, as opposed to like hindsight's 2020. Because yes, I've yet to this day to have someone go, oh, I'm still pissed that happened 5 years ago, and I'm still mad that I wasn't in this role.
You're like, wow, that made so much sense. The timing, it all makes sense in hindsight.
Sense. Yeah.
Before we wrap up, any piece of advice that you've shared so much, and I appreciate it, like that you haven't mentioned that you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
What have we not touched on? I think that, what I'll actually hammer in, and we kind of touched on this and it's a little bit different, but all my clients know, like, all I talk about is relationship building. And I think that's really like the most important thing that you can do in your career. And especially now in this world we were talking about before, like it feels so virtual and it's harder to, meet people and things like that. It really is, whether you're happy in your job or unhappy. Like, even if you're like, I love my job, I never want to leave it, I still want you to be focusing on building relationships and expanding your network, because you just never know how that might be able to help you in the future. So I think that's like a little bit more tangible than some of like the big picture thinking that we've been talking about. But that's like my number one thing is always be building relationships. And if you're someone who's an introvert and that feels intimidating to you, again, networking should not be something that's transactional of, help me get a job. It truly is relationship building. I want to get to know you. I really admire the career path you've built. I want to learn what you love about your role and what you don't. Like, right? See it as a way to build a relationship and exchange value.
And I think most people are happy to share those things. I think most people that especially are in a place that they are fulfilled and successful by their terms are happy to pay it forward 100%. And like share how they got there. I think you made a really good point too, that even if you are somebody that's happy in your career, it is still valuable to relationship build. It's still value to self-reflect. It's still value to understand your values, your strengths, your points of engagement, disengagement. So even for anyone listening that is happy in their career, these are still valuable things 100%. To do.
Yeah, and it goes back to that idea of alignment, because even in your role right now, if you feel relatively happy, if you have a better sense of, this is where my strengths are, this is what I really enjoy, this is what engages me, you can then share that information, with someone in leadership or your manager, and be able to kind of self-advocate from the perspective of like, here's where I can bring more value, right? And if you're wanting to grow in your career where you are, you need to be sharing those kinds of things. Like, hey, this is where I can help the team the most. This is where I really can lean into my strengths to be able to, be as supportive as possible. So no matter what, it's the type of work and reflection that will help you regardless of where you are in your career.
I think this episode has been so wonderful and great. And I think it's like going to provide hope for people that feel like that stuckness, or feel that maybe it's not possible to pivot or find a career that they're happy in. So thank you so much for being here. And before we wrap up, just tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, sure. So it's really easy. My website's elianagoldsteincoaching.com, and my Instagram is Eliana. I think Eliana_Goldstein. Really, just if you look up Eliana Goldstein, you will find me. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and everything that you shared today.
It's a
pleasure. Of course.
Hi, everyone. It's Beth, your favorite therapist, or at least I hope I am, and host of Quiet the Clock. I am so excited to share the secret of my glowing skin with all of you. Lumine Face Pro. This amazing device has completely transformed my skin, and I've noticed a real difference in tone and texture in such a short amount of time. Lumine Face Pro uses advanced microcurrent technology to gently stimulate your facial muscles, promoting collagen production and improving skin elasticity. I mean, amazing. Hey guys, I'm Beth. Thank you so much for tuning in to Quiet the Clock. If you want to hear more episodes and learn more about how to dismantle societal timelines, live life on your own terms, live life fully and authentically, subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and you can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Quiet the Clock Pod. You guys, I'm really excited. We just created all this amazing merch. And so if you're loving the podcast and you want to support our cause and continue to hear amazing episodes, please support us by buying some merch. I am living in these sweatshirts every day. We have a range of colors. We have hoodies, we have mugs, we have hats, we have journals. We have all of the things, and I love having them on because it's just a reminder to quiet the clock, to slow down, to like let life unfold and be happy. So there's meaning and purpose behind wearing it too, which is a nice reminder. So check out our website, quiettheclock.com, to get your merch.
If this episode resonated with you, I would love for you to give Quiet O'Clock a follow. We are on all streaming platforms, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. Like, follow, subscribe. Please leave us a review. Continue to join us for conversations on how to rewrite your own timeline and live life on your own terms.